Good morning, everyone. Today's speaker is Carlos Swonke. He is here today to present to us a new year and a new administration. What environmental issues does TxDot face? Carlos joined TxDot in 1987. He has a bachelor's degree in geology from Sul Ross State University and has a master's degree from Texas State University. He worked in the Environmental Affairs Division until 1998 when he took a position at a consulting firm in Austin. Over the following 13 years, Carlos served as a project manager working on a variety of projects, including clients such as the Department of Defense, the National Park Service, FEMA, the City of Austin, and other local governments, and TxDot. In 2012, Carlos became the director of TxDot's Environmental Affairs Division. The Environmental Affairs Division oversees TxDot's environmental programs, develops environmental policies, coordinates with TxDot's districts on environmental issues, manages contracts, and conducts environmental investigations. And without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Carlos. Thank you, Carlos, for being here today.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction, and good morning, everybody. Glad to be here and talking to you all. It's my first invitation to this group, and had to get a little bit familiar with your membership. Today's presentation, recognizing from your membership, is very broad, so I'm not going to use do my usual deep dive into NEPA or NEPA related issues, and didn't really want to bore you too much with any getting too much into the regulations, because I recognize your group is diverse, and so may not be that all applicable. So my thought is to kind of cover first off what's the bigger, broader issues that TxDot is dealing with, or you may have heard about through looking at some headlines that we've been in the news lately, and then also transitioning from that into what this new administration is looking at in the way of transportation and environmental issues, and how that might come down and affect us here at TxDot. I think Lindsay mentioned earlier about questions, certainly in the chat box, as well as maybe even raising your hand through the virtual mechanism here, and anytime throughout. So that's fine. I probably have about I'm going to guess 20 minutes. Check the clock now. Of material, 20 to 25 minutes of material. So there's plenty of time for Q&A. All right, with that, let me get started here. All right, a little bit of background about myself, just if you're not familiar with me or my role at TxDot. Backing up a little bit, I've been in this field for about 33 years. And as mentioned in my bio, I started off at TxDot out of school, out of graduate school, and basically in dealing with water resources. That was starting off with Edwards Aquifer issues here in Central Texas, as well as wetland work and dealing with Corps of Engineers permits. That started broadening into a variety of different areas related to water and natural resources. After that 11 years, I thought I saw an opportunity to move into the private sector. So I took a job with what was then Turner, Colley and Braden, TCB. And then I guess I was there not too long, and then AECOM took them over not long after I'd gotten there, and stayed there a little while longer, and then moved over to Blanton and Associates for a couple of years before this current position came open. This position being the director of the Environmental Affairs Division came open. I was just over 9 years ago. I've been here ever since, and enjoying working with great people here in my division, as well as TxDot, a lot of great consultants and stakeholders that we deal with. So it's been interesting and fun work. And what is that work? Well, as mentioned, a lot of it deals with developing projects through meeting federal environmental requirements. Chiefly, this is the National Environmental Policy Act and that host of other laws and processes that come under that for those projects that we push forward through our design and construction process that have federal funding, which is the majority of the projects that hit the ground. And so NEPA is a big part of what we do. We also deal with a lot of the public involvement that goes along with that. as well as some of the hazardous material issues outside of NEPA that deals with hazardous materials investigations, ESAs, discoveries during construction, managing contracts for those consultants who do that work, um, and then a few other miscellaneous issues, but those are really the main task of what my division does, the Environmental Affairs Division. We work mainly through our district offices. There are 25 district offices, TxDot district offices across the state. They are kind of the front lines of moving the projects forward. As you noticed in my bio, certainly in my background, I was a project manager throughout my consultant years. And I think most of y'all know that besides doing the technical work, you're chasing work, you're managing your upper management in your company, you're responding to clients' needs, and managing a team on multiple projects usually. So multitasking, I think everybody in this call is probably familiar with that. And being a manager and supervisor throughout most of my career is dealing with those people issues as well. As the director of TxDot's Environmental Affairs Division, I think you probably recognize I've described mostly what that entails. Statewide, we are kind of the oversight for all that goes on with TxDot, working through and mainly with our district offices. The NEPA program is the big part of what we do. There's a lot of work that goes through TxDot. About $7 billion worth of construction a year goes through TxDot. And before that work is shovel ready, it goes through environmental review. And so, the idea of managing that pipeline from beginning to end through the environmental process, whether it's a couple months or several years to get those projects shovel ready, we are doing that environmental process and overseeing it and kind of responsible for keeping it on track. So it does stay on schedule and gets through the compliance checks and all the reviews efficiently and being able to check those boxes of meeting the laws and requirements. In my office, I have about 80 employees that work here, and those 80 employees work with the district people across the state. There are about another 70 or 80 district environmental people that deal with this same work. So we all as a group manage and monitor these projects through the process. All right, moving beyond myself. So as I talked about, I'm going to really talk about some headlines in the news just to kind of give you a little bit of background. I think if you haven't seen, maybe you've noticed some of these, but I think it gives some insight into what's going on with TxDot from a higher level and maybe also from a public interest standpoint. There's certainly a lot beyond the headlines that goes on, but again, I'm trying to make this interesting and also informative. So I'll talk about the headlines and then transition those headlines into the administration's new initiatives that we expect to see affecting the way we do our work here. All right, a couple months ago, these headlines are just very recent, so nothing too stale here. I think it was back in maybe February. We let out a news release because we had done a study about how much work we were doing across the state. And really, it's a record amount of work that's on the ground currently going on construction. $24 billion worth of work going on currently or at that time. And as I mentioned, there's a pipeline that delivers that work to be shovel ready. And with that, there are TxDot environmental people working in that pipeline to get those projects ready. This is thousands of projects moving through. Last year, we did over 3,000 NEPA approvals on projects, getting those ready to go to final design and construction. And of course, there are a lot of consultants that do the work, that have been doing this work. And what is amazing about that $24 billion number is that that came out just a couple months ago. That means that was in the previous year, mostly 2020, and that's with the restrictions that COVID has put on our program. My whole group has been working from home remotely for the past year. Consultants have been under the same issues and restrictions, and yet we've managed to continue that pipeline moving. It's a credit to TxDot staff, it's a credit to consultants. Those regulatory agencies we deal with that have to go through and approve and review and grant us permits, staying on the job and getting the work done. It was a tremendous hit on our public involvement program to try to adjust really on the fly to to not being able to have in-person public meetings, and how we had to adjust to that, the limitations there. So anyway, it's not just that it's a big number, it's also a number to recognize in the context of where we are today. And then looking ahead, we have a 10-year plan, and in that 10-year plan, we have 8,000 projects lined up in that plan, totaling more than $74 billion. And that's just, again, a recognition of the volume of work. Within that work, there's hundreds or thousands of site assessments to be done, wetland surveys, historic resource surveys, thousands of public meetings yet to be done. So there's just all these things, much movement under the surface of those 8,000 projects that are coming online and then moving forward. So just kind of emphasizing what we're doing to contribute to these projects going on, and also looking ahead. We've heard the news about the infrastructure bill. So will federal money contribute more to that $74 billion? It seems like it will in the future. So not just that we've been very busy, we should expect to get busier as a new infrastructure bill works its way through Congress. All right, getting into some very specific issues. This came out just maybe earlier this month. The headline, if you're in Houston, you may have heard and read about the North Houston Highway Improvement Project. It is a huge project in Houston, huge from a dollar amount, also huge from the impact on environmental issues, as well as impact on the city itself. This is Interstate 45 from the north down into Houston and around downtown. It also involves 610 and involves I-10 and involves I-69. So it's some substantial work. We issued the record of decision on the EIS, early February, and not long after there is some opposition to the project, and based on environmental justice issues, they had written a letter to the Federal Highway Administration. The Federal Highway Administration came back and said that if we could put a pause on continuing to procure the contract on this project while they look at the civil rights issues and Title VI issues. And as you can imagine, and as you've heard, this is very central to what the new administration is looking at when it's looking at transportation and the infrastructure bill. As you read in that second paragraph, it's kind of a first test for the administration to see how they're going to look at infrastructure and how infrastructure can add to and benefit environmental justice communities or negatively impact environmental justice communities. This project, North Houston Highway Improvement Project, is one that we really, it does have impacts that we have, at least in my career, not seen before from a transportation project. We've also pulled out the stops when it comes to environmental mitigation. So I'll talk a bit more about this project in a minute, just as an example. And I put that last paragraph in there because I thought it was just a funny quote from an attorney who's at FHWA. This is a big deal. Well, that's really stepping out there. Whenever you're looking at and putting a quote into a newspaper is just entertaining to me, at least. Yes, it is a big deal. It's a big project. It's a test of the new administration, and if the project goes sideways, it's going to be a big letdown for the future improvements of transportation in Houston area. All right, moving on to another headline that came out last month, I believe it was, and something a little more positive, but it's really a significant number when you look at it. We, TxDot, entered into a partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to be part of the conservation agreement for the monarch butterfly. And our part is the addition of almost 500,000 acres to the conservation program. And this program is intended to help conserve the monarch and speed the recovery if the monarch is listed under the Endangered Species Act. And I think you may have heard some of the discussion about listing the monarch, and certainly the decline of the monarch is very newsworthy and of concern, as well as if the monarch is listed, that would be a big concern because the habitat from the monarch encompasses, our potential habitat, let's say, encompasses such a huge geographic area. The flyway of the monarch from the upper central part of the United States through the central part of the United States into Mexico is a huge area. And so the potential, getting some feedback here. The potential impact of listing the monarch would have repercussions to a lot of industries, obviously beyond transportation. So us participating in the agreement was certainly us trying to do our part, TxDot trying to do our part. What that means for us and that 450,000 acres, is luckily, not just luckily, it was obviously by design. TxDot has a very aggressive wildflower and roadside management program that seeks to preserve and enhance the wildflower habitat and minimize mowing. And so those two things right there obviously just fit into conservation for monarch habitat. And a little bit about monarch habitat, you're looking at trying to support the growth of milkweed and the propagation of milkweed. And so when we don't mow areas or when we manage areas for wildflowers, we also are able to manage subsequently those areas for milkweed growth. And so that was a somewhat easy thing to do for us. And obviously it does involve a commitment for how those areas are managed in the future. But again, we were happy to be able to contribute in this area. All right. So moving into more of what's going on with the new administration, what we're looking at as TxDot and the transportation industry in general, I guess. The Secretary Buttigieg was actually in Austin a few weeks ago. You may have heard he was a speaker at South by Southwest. That was back in March 18th. And he has been repeating some of the things he's been saying before that I think gives us an idea of where he wants to go with the Department of Transportation. And certainly some of these clips from what he said, this is from the news article, gives us an indication. First off, that first paragraph says that he's looking for really transformation of how we do infrastructure. It's past time for the reform, and current circumstances and new technologies have brought about opportunity for change. So yeah, so I think transformation is in the air, and in so many ways. Obviously beyond environmental issues, that there is, whether it's the auto industry, whether it's technologies for driverless vehicles, whether it's other modes of transportation coming into play here more so than they have in the past due to new technologies. I think there are a lot of things revolving around that are transformative to our industry, and we need to be prepared to adapt and accommodate these changes, whether by policy, rule, initiatives, funding the way transportation is funded. I think we need to be prepared for changes coming down the pipeline. As he said, certainly we recognize this, always have, is that we need to make sure we take care of what we have, what's already in place. And in many areas, transportation infrastructure is in need of repair, maintenance, and upgrading. And that is an important thing. I think looking forward to some things that might be changing, that next sentence where he's said that the next step is to get ready for our climate future. All right, well, there is an indication that I think we've heard a lot about infrastructure regarding addressing climate change and greenhouse gases. And then lastly, is another continuing theme that we've heard from the new administration, talking about infrastructure in addressing equity, social equity, and in particular racial inequity. So those two items right there, what does that mean for us, TxDot? What does it mean to transportation, or at least highway transportation? What does trying to get ready for our climate future look like in transportation? And how is it that you address equity? So going back, this depends a lot on how the new infrastructure bill moves forward and these other initiatives, of course. And then whether they come down in the way of regulations, whether they come down into policy changes. We shall see, but these things are moving through Congress now, whether they're bills or whether they're funding discussions. And let me talk about climate future for starters, but I want to look at a project example first. Well, let me start off with this about climate and greenhouse gases. I think when it comes to transportation, there's multiple facets of this issue. One is, will greenhouse gases be regulated in the way of transportation? Transportation is the biggest sector emitter of greenhouse gases. CO2 has been deemed by the Supreme Court to be a subject to regulation under the Clean Air Act. So, there's been talk of a performance measurement of greenhouse gases and reporting of greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector by DOTs. So a lot of talk about kind of managing and monitoring, measuring greenhouse gases. Talk about, I think that's one facet of it. Another facet of greenhouse gases and climate is the auto industry itself. Certainly when it comes to, when you talk about transportation emissions in the transportation sector, especially roadways, it's, obviously the tailpipe of cars using the infrastructure. So that is obviously a big change, and we know that industry is changing quickly when you're talking about going from combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles that don't, at least directly, emit greenhouse gases. And so that's another facet of transportation. And then the third one is how we build. And I think that's the more relevant one to the work that we do, or at least I do in our group here. So now with that transition to, let me talk about a project in particular. And I mentioned this project, the North Houston Highway Improvement Project. It is, maybe let's start here. What I want to do is kind of, what does the addressing climate issues in a project look like? And I'll talk about one point in this project in Houston. If you haven't seen a map, I'm going to zoom in here on Google Earth and show you the extent of this project in Houston. The North Houston Highway Improvement Project extends from Beltway 8 to the north, taking I-45 down across 610 here into the downtown area. And what it will do here is eliminate this path of I-45, including the Pierce Elevated here, and take I-45 traffic in and around the east side of Houston on the current pathway of I-69, obviously widening and depressing this section of I-69 below grade, so that the street crossings are at grade and the freeway section is below grade near the convention center, and then taking it down and connecting with I-45 back here. And so this piece coming out as an interstate, depending what the city wants to do with it, possibly they have ideas. But we're really redoing and restructuring how traffic moves around downtown, and long needed improvements on I-45 throughout, because pieces of this highway haven't changed. Yes.
We're not seeing the map.
Oh no, golly, sorry about that. I'm on screen share. What are you seeing?
I'm seeing the slide, the U.S. Secretary of Transportation slide. You may be just sharing the slide screen and not the actual desktop. So that may be why we can't see it.
I wonder.
You may need to stop share and
let me do that.
Here.
Thank you. Okay. Is the
perfect? Yes, can see it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, just yell at me. Yeah, just letting you know where this I-45 project is in Houston, as I mentioned, from Beltway 8 down into downtown, and how it will take traffic east of downtown. And so I was saying, obviously, if you're familiar with this path, pieces of I-45 have not changed or been upgraded since it was built in the finished construction in the mid-late 60s. So obviously there are some major design issues, safety issues on this project that don't meet standards. So beyond that, obviously there's of course a big congestion problem along this path and in the Houston area. So what does this, what does this mean for equity? And one of the things that, I'm sorry, we're talking about climate change at this point. What does it mean for climate change? And I'm transitioning subjects as well now too. I mean, so visuals. And what I'm looking at now is a cross section of the roadway. Is that that's not visible?
We're not seeing a screen change.
Okay. I guess I have to transition this way. There we go.
There we
right.
go.
Thank you for checking me.
Mhm.
All right. So climate change. I think one of the main things with climate change is single occupancy vehicles and emphasizing more transit use, more multiple occupancy vehicles. And so when you're laying out a roadway, I think enhancing transit abilities, capabilities, and other modes beyond single occupancy vehicles. If you look at the existing section of I-45 as it heads north out of Houston, this is what it looks like. You've got 4 main lanes in each direction, headed in each direction. And you've got a single lane of HOV in the middle. So, you know, whatever transit capabilities in HOV, it has the single lane. The proposed improvement in this section is to go to this. And if you look, we're not even really addressing or improving the general purpose lanes. We're highly expanding what we call max lanes there, the HOV and transit lanes, so that the capability to manage these lanes and use them for transit and HOV use is highly improved over the existing condition. So with that change, we are encouraging and facilitating the use of transit. And so, you know, with that subtle movement, we're trying to facilitate and make easier the use of transit, the reliability of transit, the capability, the volume of transit to be able to move on these lanes. And so with people secondarily affecting people who might want to get out of their driving themselves and use this transit. So that is one way that you start looking at climate change, addressing climate change with how we build and lay out our roadways. Making more options available that encourage non-single occupancy vehicle use. And so this is on the I-45 project. And again, this is how this might play out in the way we do our work. Will we be looking at more projects that enhance transit use? Make sure I transition correctly here. I'm going to go back to the screen share and back to Google Earth Pro. Okay, if you're not seeing the Google Earth, let me know.
Yep, we got Google Earth with the green outline.
Good deal. All right, so talking about the second subject of equity, that seems to be a major theme of what we're looking forward to here. This project has big impacts and relocations, in particular of environmental justice communities through residential relocations and public housing relocations. One of the public housing projects is right here. This is Clayton Homes, a Houston Housing Authority public housing project. And the realignment of the project, as you can see, there's I-69 here. We're going to realign slightly the intersection here with 10 and 69 and soon to be 45 to go through this area through Clayton Homes, the complex, this complex of homes. And we coordinated with the Houston Housing Authority early on with the alternatives, you know, many years ago, said, hey, there's an option that goes through Clayton Homes. You know, how do you feel about that option? And they encouraged us to say, hey, if you can buy us out, that would be good. As part of the background info, Clayton Homes is a 60 some odd year old facility. It's certainly very, very aged. This is Buffalo Bayou here, and during Hurricane Harvey, Buffalo Bayou came out of its banks and flooded much of Clayton Homes, to the extent that several units in Clayton Homes are no longer occupied. Not units, actually buildings. Buildings of Clayton Homes aren't able to be occupied this day. And so what we've been talking about with Clayton Homes is to purchase the property, not just at fair value, but purchase the property with a condition that, look, we know you're dealing with low-income residents here. We don't want to relocate these residents to a location that really disrupts their community. We want you to relocate these residents in the area. So the agreement was with the housing authority was to relocate them within 2 miles of their current location. And the housing authority is looking for sites, and outside, obviously, the Buffalo Bayou floodplain. And they are looking at a site that is just right over here. I think they're looking at these 2 sites, or at least in this general vicinity outside of the floodplain. But we are paying them a premium for this relocation and buyout so that they can build not just a new facility with affordable housing, but a location that's nearby so that these people can stay within, this is the 5th Ward area of Houston. So the kids can ideally at least have the chance to stay in the same schools. They can seek the same healthcare doctors they've been working with, and other services they've been working with. So we've been dealing with the housing authority and the acquisition of Clayton Homes to do that. We entered into an agreement, purchasing early acquisition agreement with them over a year ago, and they have since begun shopping for sites and trying to advance the construction of their new facilities so that when the highway is constructed, these residents will have the opportunity to move in to the new facility as soon as possible. So that's just one example of equity, and what certainly in our eyes seems like a good proposition for the residents of this aged facility that's prone to flooding. And so that's just one example of how you work in equity and how we as an agency try to provide mitigation that is not just the typical buyout of a facility that might be environmental justice related, but trying to enhance the best possible or create the best possible outcome for this. So that is, as I say, an example of how equity may play into the advancement and development of projects through the environmental process. All right, I'll just jump back to the slide because I'm at the end. Slide mode. Not that I really need to transition to this, but here we go. That would conclude my presentation. I certainly accept any discussion there. Any questions on this or anything else you're aware of that I might be able to provide some insight or answers on. Thank you for the opportunity and the invitation, and open it up for questions.
Okay, Carlos, thank you so much. If anyone has questions at this time on the information that Carlos presented, or if anything else has come to mind that I want to put this out there, want to pick his brain on at this time. If anyone wants to come off of mute, share your thoughts, have questions.
Hey, Lindsay, it's Andrew. Hey, Carlos, I'm Andrew. Nice to meet you.
Hey.
Quick question for you to circle back to the HOV lanes and multi-person transit. How has the pandemic affected the mentality of people to try to move forward with a public transit or a more robust mass transit program, given social distancing and new concerns about being around other people, especially in close confinement?
Boy, yeah, it's a great question and very relevant question, for transit providers across the country. As you can imagine, yeah, they've taken a hit as far as ridership, and how is that going to come back with the cautious return to whatever the normal is going to be. Obviously, I don't, they're looking at that in multiple entities, agencies, and transportation research folks are looking at that now, not just how ridership will come back, but how transit can accommodate the concerns. And it's still unfolding, obviously, to the extent, just in the same way traffic is starting to come back, ridership is starting to come back, but it's not back to normal, at least in a lot of places. So I think we'll see how it unfolds, but I certainly know it is being looked at in the way of being able to maintain ridership to sustain transit. Of course, with a lot of the transit capabilities in Texas, our challenge is getting the ridership to support from an economic and congestion management standpoint, the use of transit and the build out of transit. But good question, and I think we'll see in the near future how that plays out.
Cool, thanks.
Thanks, Andrew, for the question, and Carlos for the response. Are there any other questions out there? We got about 7 minutes left of Carlos' time. Take advantage of that.
Good deal.
We're going to do the pregnant pause here. Let everybody get a little uncomfortable in their seat, see if they want to ask any questions.
There is a question in chat.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Let me scroll down. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, I see that.
Can you see that, Carlos? What is TxDOT's position on the use of TCQ plume management zones?
Ooh, that is certainly a detailed question that I would have to defer to one of my folks on the latest on the plume management zones and what has our response been. I can get back to you however you want to contact me. I'm trying to think of the best way to contact me. I can just put this out there. I'll put my email address out there. And if you send me a separate email, I will chase that down and get back to you.
Great, thank you, Carlos, for being willing to follow up with the question responses. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear the plume management zone question too. I've never had any issue with it within a municipality or anything like that. But if it's outside, that's an interesting question.
Thanks, Brian, for speaking up. One of the things we can do is Dorothy's kept track of participants today in our meeting. We can get the question out to Carlos. And why don't I do that, Carlos? I'll put that in an email to you and await response, and then we can follow up with the membership who attended today's meeting with a response to that.
Okay, sounds like a plan. I can certainly track that down. And
it's Brian again. If I can piggyback on that question too, since we're asking it and you're looking into it, I'd ask about what their position is on being included in an MSD also for TxDOT rights of way. Again, it's not an issue I've ever really run into because municipalities like it. I would imagine TxDOT would probably prefer to be included in an MSD if there's contamination coming onto their property, but I don't know their position on it at all.
Brian, that's a great question. I'm sure Carlos has to give that some thought and get back to us on that as well. Would you mind typing that up in chat so I can copy and paste that into an email to Carlos for follow-up? Thank you so much. Got about 4 minutes left here. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, this is Jimmy Gibson. I have a question. I know a lot of people are starting to get back to work with the shots that are coming out, and I wanted to see if TxDOT had a plan on when your employees are going to get back to work, working in the office, and when you may be opening up to meet with vendors to talk about projects and opportunities.
Yeah, that is certainly a question that's on all of our minds here at TxDOT. And really the latest from the leadership here is that a gradual return is expected, and there's no date for a full return yet. There's no discussion of alongside of that. There's no discussion of really a requirement for a full return at any point in time. I think the expectation is that we will probably maintain some more flexibility as far as being able to work remotely in our work schedules. We have loosened our restrictions on meetings, and so if you need to meet with somebody at TxDot staff, I think you could contact them now and kind of see what the availability is to meet face to face, as well as being able to meet with consultants on projects and issues. I think that is loosening, and I think we'll have more direction on how and when we can do that. As you said, with the more security being provided by the vaccinations and other protocol that we've put in place. So, and it's not a straight answer because even the TxDot leadership doesn't have a straight answer on that. We're able to work remotely and virtual fairly well, but I know we are missing a lot of the face-to-face interaction with not just ourselves, each other here, but also with our constituent stakeholders and the folks who do the work with us. So if you have a particular concern with somebody you need to meet with, I would say make that request to them and see if they can arrange something.
Okay, great. It's good to know you guys are open to meeting now. I know a lot of the clients out there have a no meeting policy still, so glad to hear that's a potential.
Sure.
All right. Well, that is the end of our time with Carlos today. Carlos, thank you so much for joining us today and presenting. And we look forward to seeing everyone at our next meeting in May. Again, that's going to be on the ASTM 1527 standard changes. If you do need a continuing education certificate, please email me. My email is in the chat stream, and I'll get that right out to you. Again, thank you, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you.